Welcome, I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and mysterious stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my channel's weekly compendium, ending Monday, October 10th, 2022. Case file number 775, written by Straight Professor 68, Quantum Immortality from the Other Side. I've always been really interested in the how, what, why of it all, and recently applied that interest to reading and watching documentaries about different quantum theories. That's when I stumbled across mentions of astral projection and quantum immortality. I remembered my mom describing experiences to me when I was young from her own childhood that sounded just like what I'd read astral projection was like. The next time we talked on the phone, I brought it up and asked her to describe it to me. She can't do it anymore, and can't remember exactly when it stopped. I took notes, but that's another post. For craps and giggles, I decided to describe quantum immortality to her and asked her if she remembered any time in her life that she should have died but didn't. The example I gave her was one of an impending head-on collision. You close your eyes and brace for impact. It's unavoidable, but nothing happens and you open your eyes and the truck is behind you driving in the opposite direction as though it had driven right through you. No one else on the road noticed a thing. This is where it gets strange. My mom is immediately reminded of almost that exact thing that apparently happened to her one winter night in 2009 to 2010, and apparently to me as well, which is insane because I really don't quite remember it. What I do remember is that my parents had just split up. I was 19 or 20 and a sophomore in college. I was living with my mom in a townhouse and commuting to school because I had a horrible roommate experience on campus. We were really close at the time, going through a lot together. That night, I remember that we went to see Alice in Wonderland in 3D. We got pretty buzzed in the parking lot first, not after, don't worry, and loaded up on snacks. I remember it was freezing and snowy, and it was a late showing, so it was pitch black outside. This was in upstate New York. I remember that my mom drove the Prius that she still has to this day. What I don't remember is what she described to me happened on the way home, or if I do, it's very vague and might just be because I imagined what she told me. She said we were on a main road between towns headed home, crossing over the Erie Canal on a bridge that slightly curves and intersects almost immediately at the end with another main road on each side. She said there was a car coming from the opposite direction, and the road, especially the bridge, was extremely icy. The other car started to slide, and I guess it was coming at us. My mom said she couldn't get out of the way to the left or right because even if it weren't too slippery, we were on a bridge, so there wasn't really anywhere to go. She also couldn't slam on the brakes because then we'd just be sliding too and would just make it worse. She said she did the mom seatbelt, which why, with one arm, and closed her eyes and braces for impact. And she actually doesn't remember much after that other than being home. Doesn't specifically remember being like, wait, what? I was floored when she told me this because I hadn't remembered it at all. I just thought, and then forgot for a few weeks. Yesterday, we were talking on the phone again, my mom and I, and it dawned on me that we barely speak anymore. She said something wildly out of character that left me speechless. Not the first time she's done so in recent years. She also mentioned that I had changed and that we didn't agree on anything anymore and that I was hard to talk to. I realized that I also didn't recognize this woman in a lot of ways. The mom I remember as a kid, despite all her flaws, was pretty liberal-minded and taught me about civil rights, how deep down we're really all the same. She pondered the stars, and while I was raised Catholic, thanks to grandparents on dad's side, she always taught me to be open-minded too, but also wary of all religions. She talked about reincarnation and the soul, and yeah, though not on purpose, she used to astral project as a child. She was one of my best friends and a great comfort. I don't know if we've lived too far apart for too long, or she's just getting old and she's so engrossed in her local news media, I don't watch television news at all, that is driving her to change. But my mom is now super conservative and is more rude to random people than I ever remember. Not that one implies the other. She says what she thinks and doesn't care who it insults. The odd part is, she's the happiest she's ever been. My stepdad is great. They have a nice house. They're both still working, but they have great jobs. They're financially secure. They have hobbies. Also, she randomly out of nowhere in her 50s developed a nut allergy, which I know can happen, but I figured it could be relevant. Case notes for file 775, Quantum Immortality, from the other side. So one thing to remember about quantum immortality, or at least ponder on, because of course this is all speculation, wildly interesting speculation, but still, is that if one person dies, and then another person next to them dies too, say in a car crash you're with your mother, and you both die at the same time, well, if quantum immortality is guaranteed, does this mean that you'll both be transposed your sentience to the same adjacent universe? I mean, I guess it would depend, right? It would depend on the copies of you in the adjacent universe and how closely related they are, but also on if you're even alive in that universe still. There'd be some rewinding of time shenanigans going on, and we have seen that before in events of quantum immortality. I guess it depends on how important is it to the coding of the universe that people who are closely related, or friends, be transposed to the same universe. Maybe it is important. Maybe that is a factor. But also, maybe that doesn't happen at all. Maybe it's just random. Maybe the universe you go to, maybe there's a general sphere of location, hard to describe, like the medium between universes. I have no idea what that is. It's not space as we would know it. There probably is still a distance to travel, and the further it is, the less sense there is in you going there, because I imagine it still requires energy, maybe processing power, the further away it is. Can almost think of it like transmitting data over a Ethernet cord. At a certain distance, it starts losing signal strength, and you just need a better transmitting cable, like a fiber optic or cable. I get the impression, though, that the transfer is limited in distance, or at least there's a strong preference for it being closer. And in that sense, you may be the original you from this universe. You don't remember this close encounter with the other car because it never happened to you. You've always been in this universe. It's your mom that was transposed into this universe, and that would also explain how seemingly she changed. She was liberal, then she was conservative, and maybe more rude all of a sudden. That could explain some of it. There was a blending of sentience, and your mother changed, because it's not just your mother. Or it is your mother plus. Case file number 776, written by Nameless Drifter 1. 2 moms for the price of 1. This is my first time writing this story out, let alone telling anyone else, except my mom, about it. So it's the year 2015, and after the graduation ceremony and everybody's given their speeches and whatnot, we're all out in the parking lot heading home. I was talking with some of my friends out there before heading to the car. As I started leaving, I noticed this woman on her way to pass my left. I look at her and she looks a lot like my mother, with the exception of looking maybe between 15 to 35 years older and with slightly different, almost curled hair. Her hair color was like a very faded blonde, brownish in between. Her facial features were extremely similar to my mother's. She was maybe an inch or a couple shorter as well. I stared at her for a good couple seconds before her gaze met mine, and I looked away. Then, as she was behind me, I looked one more time. After that, I didn't see my mother's car anywhere, so I sat down and waited in the parking lot. There were these kids that I didn't recognize. It looked like they had been there from another school, but I don't know why they were there. There was this blonde kid who started eyeballing me really intensely, like he recognized me from somewhere, but he was trying to figure out who I was. I was a little uncomfortable and was pretending to look like I didn't notice him, but he stared at me for a good while, so eventually I just looked at him and stared back. That's when he looked away. I'm not sure what was up with that dude. Not sure if this had any connection to seeing that woman, but it happened in the same hour. I eventually found my mom's car, and she was talking with one of my friend's moms. I didn't mention it to her, she seemed a bit puzzled, but that's it. I can't say for sure if this was actually an older, future version of my mother. It could have just been some older woman who looked a lot like her. But my mom has pretty distinct features, Has anyone else had an encounter or experienced phenomena like this? Case notes for file 776. 2 moms for the price of 1. So yeah, there are a lot of people on this planet, almost 8 billion, or actually, did we cross the threshold into 8 billion? Somewhere around there. That's an unfathomable amount of people. Is it conceivable that there's someone out there that looks just like your mom, just a bit older? Yeah, of course. Now, that they're in the same vicinity as you is more rare, but it's not inconceivable. If it is just down the road of glitches, then I don't think it's a doppelganger. The impression of that is not at all related to doppelgangers. You also mentioned that she's a bit shorter, so that can just be explained by the fact that as we age, we slightly shorten, our spine compresses more, we often also don't maintain proper back posture when we're sitting. I wonder who the boy is, if he's at all relevant to this glitch. Maybe your mom had another child, and he has this instinct that you're his sibling. Maybe. Kinda neat. Hi folks, just a quick update. As you know or may not know, I've turned on channel memberships now. There are 2 tiers. You can support the channel if that's all you want to do for $1 a month, and you'll get special emojis and a channel membership icon next to your name if you ever comment, so people can know you support, and obviously I tremendously appreciate it. And also for $5 a month you can gain access to special fictional horror stories that I'm narrating. Case file number 777. Written by Anonymous. Where did the time go? This is back when I was in college. A group of us, 4 plus me, were hanging out between classes and heading out to grab a bite. We talked for a bit, and then 2 of our friends announced they had to head back as they had another class. Each class is an hour long. Now with those 2 gone, my other 2 friends and I decided to listen to some music. One of them played You're an Army by Rick Pino. This song is roughly 4 minutes and 30 seconds long. The song ended, and we looked up to find that the 2 friends who had walked away to their class had returned, and we curiously asked, did the class get cancelled? They looked at us confused and said, no, we finished the class. Have you been here all this while? All this while? Apparently, as we listened to this 4 minute and 30-second piece of gospel, an entire hour had gone by among the 5 of us. We haven't yet been able to explain what happened. If only my boring lectures lasted 4.5 minutes and accounted for an hour, that'd be lovely. Case notes for file 777. Where did the time go? So in the comments, someone asked if maybe your friends were just trolling you, but in reality, you did check the time on your phone and an hour really did pass. No prank. This really happened and it's baffling. Time glitches are just incredibly interesting to me because time is so fundamental and interlinked with space. It's equivalent to just teleporting around. Basically, it's as tremendously awesome as that. So let's get the alien abduction thing out of the way. Obviously not. In the middle of a school and during the day with so many witnesses around, there's no way. If aliens abduct, it seemingly requires some sort of visible light, and basically it's not incognito, so they wouldn't do it in the middle of the day in the school, to my knowledge anyways. I guess it's some sort of space-time bubble, and these do frequently pop around. I think it is related to cars that are teleported, in advance, and sometimes even just people. Somehow they take a step and they're way zipped forward. Again, space-time, they're interlinked. Time is just another dimension of space. It's hard to conceive of, but it's true. And in fact, this is, I'm always coming back to gravity because it's so entwined in how we live. Why does an apple fall to the ground? Why is there acceleration from it? But it's not really acceleration in the way you think. It's that we're all traveling at the speed of light. Normally, we're traveling almost entirely through time and not space. The path curve we take is designated all power towards time. Now we can try to shift that into space, but we're still limited by the speed of light, no matter what. A bit complicated to say, but basically, if you eliminate any spatial travel, you still travel through time, and gravity is just curving space-time. Your timeline is still traveling in time, and it's just that the time curved because of how gravity is curving space-time. It's kind of neat. There's a visual I'll link below where someone goes into better explanation for it. I find visuals help a lot. It's like a flow of space-time. So if you're an apple in this curved space-time, you're flowing with it. Because again, we're all traveling through space-time at the speed of light. It's just that most of that travel, almost all of it, is just through time and a default state. We can try to change it, but anyways, tangent over. It's not out of the realm of physics, and you can look up the Lorentz factor. If you have a large source of speed, your speed through space-time is converted into spatial travel instead of time, then you're not moving much through time. That's the Lorentz factor, and this can also apply from gravity. But I'm sure you've all seen Interstellar, a great movie. When they're on the planet, high sense of gravity. When they come back to the ship, well, spoilers, just in case you don't want to know. Spoilers. When they come back to the ship, 27 years have passed in what was an hour, I think, or a few minutes. And that's entirely plausible. That is something that happens. In fact, we have to adjust the internal clocks on GPS satellites in space, because while the difference is extremely minor at the speeds we're traveling here, there is a time anomaly, and if we don't correct for that, GPS wouldn't work. Creepy file number 50, written by Barry Ivory, The Angel of Mercy, Dave. My grandfather, Jim, died when I was 17, around 5 years ago, and his last months were rough on the whole family. He had advanced brain cancer, but he spent most of his time at home under hospice care. One afternoon, it was about 2 weeks before Jim died, I was alone with my grandpa waiting for the hospice nurse to come check in on him. A man who I'd never seen before, Dave, knocked on the door. He was wearing hospital scrubs, but he hadn't brought any equipment with him, which was odd. I asked him if he worked for the hospital, and he nodded. He said this was his first shift with Jim, but that he'd reviewed my grandfather's file and that he wanted to speak to whichever family member had the legal authority to pull the plug. Jim wasn't even on life support, so I guess Dave was using plug as an expression on my grandfather. I should say that I live in a right-to-die state where euthanasia is legal, so it's not like that option had never occurred to us. But as far as I know, no member of my family had ever expressed an openness to euthanizing Jim. I told him that I had no authority to make that decision, and that my grandfather, who was now delirious and unable to consent to much of anything, had specifically said to prolong his life indefinitely unless he was crying out in extreme pain, which he wasn't. Dave put his hand on my shoulder as though he were consoling me, and he talked about how old people become burdens that their families need to let go of. Then Dave pulled a bottle of pills out of his pocket and said they were barbiturates that would trigger a peaceful death. He said the coroner would determine that Jim died naturally from his cancer. I started to panic, and I firmly told him that under no circumstances would we be euthanizing Jim at this time. But he started to untwist the bottle as he walked towards Jim's bed. I tried to wrestle the pills from his hand, and he seemed startled. He played innocent and said he just wanted to show the pills to Jim. Dave knew perfectly well that my grandfather had almost no idea what was going on. I called 911 and rapidly explained the situation to the dispatcher. Dave suddenly became very scared and bolted out of the house. The cops arrived within 5 minutes, and Jim's actual hospice nurse arrived a few minutes after that. Based on physical description, the police and hospital staff were able to identify Dave as a recently fired hospital orderly. Dave was charged with making a criminal threat based on my testimony, but unfortunately he was acquitted. So Dave, wherever you are, let's never meet again. Case notes for the creepy file number 50, The Angel of Mercy, Dave. So they call this a mental disorder. It's where someone wants to end the suffering of someone else. They call them an angel of mercy. And this is actually pretty common, well, commoner in the realm of medicine. Doctors, often nurses, they'll become in their minds benevolent because they just want to end people's pain. I think there's also some sadism involved, sheer power control over ending someone else's life that comes into play here. My impression was, okay, this guy's a little messed up, especially because there was no pain involved here, or not much. Basically, it's taken to delusional ends where there isn't even suffering involved, but they just want to correct something wrong. But not in a good way, at all. Of course, I do believe in personal autonomy. If someone wants to end their life, then that's their business. But in this case, there was no consent at all, so very wrong. That's one person you don't want roaming around. Case file number 778, written by Carolyn McCord. The tree and even the stump vanished. In 2011, my oldest daughter was born. I was with her dad from January 2011 till October 2014. While I was pregnant with her, 2011, my ex got a PlayStation, internet, and a subscription to Netflix. I started watching Star Trek and such. Then I discovered Warehouse 13. When I finished that, it suggested I watch a show called The Librarians. There was only one season. I really liked it. Problem is, the first episode aired on December 7th, 2014. Netflix didn't get it till long after that. After we stopped paying for Netflix, I didn't get it again until 2020. I rewatched it a couple weeks ago. It's almost identical, except in the episode I watched in 2011, there was no relationship between the original librarians and his guardian. My other story happened in December 2014. I was walking through the neighborhood that is southwest of Speedway and Stone in Tucson, Arizona, with two of my friends. We found a practically brand new play kitchen. We started carrying it and got tired of carrying it when we made it to the southwest corner of Speedway and Stone. There is a low wall there which used to be the back of a funeral home. I found that out later. There was a mesquite tree right next to the wall that hung over it. This tree was probably about 15 years old. We decided to hide the play kitchen there. I called my dad to see if he could come pick it up with me later. He said yes. So he came to my place to pick me up, and we went to get it. It wasn't there. In fact, the tree wasn't even there. No stump, no hole, no freshly turned dirt. The weirdest part is, there are very few trees growing there now. Case notes for file 778. Where did the tree and stump go? So, the first story, a potential Mandela effect, but having watched the show before it even aired is just baffling. All that data somehow transmitted beforehand. Some sort of time loop? But why Netflix? Very strange. Now, the fact that the show was slightly different, I mean, it could just be your memory was off. I know I've watched Stargate so many times, Stargate SG-1, Atlantis Universe. Sometimes I'll go back and rewatch it again because I'm just weird, I like rewatching shows. And there'll be tiny differences that I just realize, okay, was it really like that all the time? Like Teal'c at some point having hair. Don't remember that, but somehow he does. I don't know. But it's probably just my memory. I think Mandela effect is real, but oftentimes it's just our memory being wonky. Now, the tree vanishing is very weird. And again, if the tree is gone, even the stump, there's no way that someone just came out and cut it out and dug up the stump as well. There's literally no evidence it was even there, as you described it. I wonder to what extent a disappearing object phenomena can apply in this case. Is there a limit to how big something can be? I mean, it's not like entities are bringing in, dump trucks to load it in, between dimensions. They're phasing it into a different reality. Everything's interconnected, right? The roots are in the earth, so why did it take the tree and not the ground itself? How do they even calibrate that, if it is an entity doing this? And if it even is disappearing object phenomena, in this case, could even be quantum immortality? Case file number 779, written by Amanda Can 77. When aliens leave their mental mark. Growing up in the 90s, I was exposed to a fair amount of aliens in the media, movies and TV like Independence Day, Men in Black, Mars Attacks, E.T., X-Files, Invader Zim, Alf, Third Rock from the Sun, you name it. I can't remember anyone in my family ever taking any sort of particular interest in aliens, but they were always sort of around. I don't know if this media is why, or maybe it was my parents' open attitude towards the subject, but I never questioned the existence of aliens. I knew stories about people being abducted and crop circles, but I didn't feel like it presented any sort of immediate danger. I never considered myself to be afraid of them, until my mom started asking me about it one morning, that is. I've always been a sleep talker, well, more of a sleep mumbler, but when I was 9 or 10, I started sleepwalking as well. My parents would find me in the living room or the hallway trying to incoherently accomplish something. Most of the time, they could just guide me back to my bed without incident. On one occasion, though, it wasn't so simple. When my mom came to check on me before she went to sleep, she saw I wasn't in my bed. She came into the room to look for me and noticed a small figure crouched in the closet. She asked me what I was doing and came closer to help me back into bed. As she started to approach, I guess I started crying, mumbling about aliens and, sorry this is gross, peeing on the floor. She was shocked and called for my dad to come help her. When he arrived, he tried to pick me up to comfort me, but I started screaming and hit him in the face, something I have never done before and haven't done again since. They had to let me cry myself out, mumbling, "The aliens, and don't take me again," over and over until I would let them help me. My mom said she doesn't think I ever really woke up because I didn't say anything as she changed my pajamas and tucked me back in. The next morning, when she asked me if I had had the dream about aliens, I didn't know what she was talking about. I had no recollection of anything that had happened the night before. She asked me if being abducted by aliens was something I worried about often, and I honestly told her it wasn't. My parents never made a big deal about the occurrence, they just wanted to make sure that I was alright, but I was pretty embarrassed. Since I had no memory of the event, I wasn't left with any fear of aliens while I was awake, but I was left with a burning curiosity as to whether they would be back. Case notes for file 779, When Aliens Leave Their Mental Mark. So yeah, X-Files is the MVP of all science fiction shows. It's where it all started for me, and I think for most people. You know, it branches out from there. Of course, Stargate and Star Trek. Star Trek might be more iconic and maybe more relevant, I guess. X-Files is just the root of it. It really sparked my desire to, I want to believe. And of course, Deep Voice and Smoking Man. Such iconic characters. You cannot get over them. And you know, it's curious. I've never felt that aliens are a threat either. I mean, there's just a logical application to that. If they were a direct threat to our entire species or world, we'd already be dead. They could just divert an asteroid into the planet, release a deadly virus, whatever. So many methods to wipe us out without us even knowing we're under attack. Now, it's possible there's other nefarious means, you know, maybe they're cultivating us to harvest our meat or something, like some giant cattle farm. I don't think it's that either. But yeah, if there's aliens around, I think they're probably either neutral or benevolent. Probably just keeping their distance, observing, seeing where we go, maybe giving us a helping hand here and there. And of course, there could be different types of aliens. It's probably not just one species. So I've never sleepwalked myself. I've always found it fascinating in people who do. Now I do think that as we sleep, our subconscious and conscious minds, they're intermingling together, trying to analyze the day's events and parse it together, decide what to keep, store in long-term memory. If we don't sleep, basically our brains just become fragmented and lose sense of reality. You can see this in people who don't sleep. They start to hallucinate, they can't make sense of the world anymore. Our brains basically, they don't need to rest, they need to configure. Yeah, because the world is just so complicated. Our brains are constantly filtering out information, but they're still taking some in, and they need to make sense of it. So it is possible that you have a repressed memory, or you had it even back then as a kid, of some sort of alien abduction. And you don't consciously know of it, but your subconscious does. So when you're sleepwalking in the dream state, your conscious and subconscious are communicating back and forth, and little fragments of that repressed memory that's buried deep inside your brain is spilling over. And while you're not consciously aware when you're awake, in that dream state, it does terrify you. Even if the aliens don't mean you any harm, it's still traumatic to be abducted. There's no getting around that, I'd say. Case file number 780, written by The Red Molly, The Very Confused Umbrella. 4 years ago, during the spring, we bought our house. My wife and I purchased an umbrella and a base from Wayfair for our back deck. The umbrella had a crank handle to open and close it. The handle has a sticker that has a blue arrow pointing in the clockwise direction to open it. It has a red arrow pointing in the reverse, counterclockwise direction to put the umbrella down. About a month ago, I went away for a few days while my wife stayed home. When I got home, I went right to the backyard to sit out and relax and noticed that the umbrella controls were backward. Now, to open the umbrella, you had to turn the handle counterclockwise. It even read so on the sticker. The blue arrow was now facing counterclockwise and the red arrow was facing clockwise. I noticed this right away because as I went to crank it clockwise, the umbrella would not open out and nothing happened. I thought, that's weird. I always crank it this way to open it. I called my wife outside and asked her if she messed with the umbrella while I was away, but there's no way in hell she could have altered the sticker. No way. It's a shiny sticker that was obviously made during the manufacturing process, and there's no way she could have made a duplicate sticker or anything like that. She obviously said no, and I showed her the issue with the umbrella and asked her if I was going crazy, if the umbrella had always been like this. I said, I know, for the last 4 years I've had to crank that thing clockwise to open it. What the hell is going on? Her and I were dumbfounded, like I really had no idea how this happened. A couple days went by, and the umbrella is now back to the way it was. Blue arrow facing clockwise to crank open, red arrow facing counterclockwise to close. It has stayed that way since, but no explanation was found. Case notes for file 780, the very confused umbrella. So the fact that this sticker and directions reverted back is what's mind-blowing to me. If it was just a one-off event, then you could say, okay, it's quantum immortality, even for the both of you, you and your wife. That in of itself is pretty wild, but the fact it reverted back, well, did you jump 2 universes in the span of a few days? I don't think so. What could have changed it? I mean, it can't be some entity. Like, imagine a spirit is trying to prank you, this low-key trickster. How would he manufacture or print out a brand new sticker to put on the umbrella? I don't see that happening. That'd be pretty impressive. Has some contacts in the industrial sector. Very impressive. I guess the one possibility is that someone bought a look-alike umbrella that did have the opposite instructions to open and close the umbrella, and somehow snuck into your yard, your backyard, and put it in there, and then changed it back, and then never told anyone about it. Why? It's theoretically possible, but I can't wrap my mind around why anyone would do that. I'm stumped. Pretty neat little glitch. I like it. Bonus file, written by Johnny B. 1917. The Fatal Dream. My best friend and I would always talk about crazy dreams we had. Never thought much of it until he told me about one where he got hit by a car and died. We were about 15 to 16 when he told me about the dream. We were into conspiracies, stuff like aliens, paranormal, lucid dreaming, so we'd talk about stuff like that a lot. And he died right before he would have turned 20. He said he was riding a skateboard wearing all black when the car hit him and could see everyone at his funeral. He even said his crush was at his funeral and laughed about it. He just kept going on about how it was so real, and it really shook me up until eventually I forgot about it. Then, a few years later, after I'd long forgotten about the dream he told me about, it happened for real. His crush was at his funeral. He did get hit by a car and died. He was wearing all black like in the dream, his work clothes, and he was riding my skateboard. It was all true. I still don't know what to make of it all. Every single detail I remember from his dream came true, and I'm sure there's parts of it he told me that I don't remember. I felt crazy. I didn't tell anyone about it. I just don't know why or how he saw it happen in his dreams. And think, what if he had never told me about it? It just left me with so many questions. But I guess now I have proof, at least to myself, that our souls go on after we die. I just wish I knew why he experienced that dream and told me about it. Like there had to be some kind of reason. I just think about how I wouldn't believe this story if I hadn't experienced it for myself. Case notes for the bonus file, The Fatal Dream. So yeah, we come back to premonitions, foretelling of the future. I'm always a bit stumped and honestly unsure of what to say exactly because I know that the future is going to happen. There's paths laid out and traced. It's up to us to decide which path we follow. The thing is, every choice that other people make will influence where we end up. Our choices matter tremendously, of course, but other people's choices and the forces of the universe that we can't predict will matter. This churn is chaos. It's unpredictable by nature. We can't even predict the weather to more than a few days, and even then there's uncertainty. Because even the tiniest change, this is one thing I've always found fascinating about weather, and just physics in general. You can't predict weather accurately more than a few days, because even the tiniest change in temperature in, say, Kansas, of being like 56.98991 degrees versus 56.9912, if it's off by a fourth of a digit, that tiny, seemingly insignificant difference in one area can affect everything going into the future, especially as you go further into the future. I mean, that's sort of related to the butterfly effect. In fact, it's directly related. That's the whole point of it. Tiny changes can make predicting the future almost impossible, and these tiny changes happen all the time. There's just no way to predict it. How much energy the sun is inputting varies slightly, and the same thing applies to all of our lives. There's so many choices being made that we cannot know, and even if we did, we couldn't predict them. And if you get right down to the very essence of it, even if you knew the position of every atom and the velocity, you couldn't predict it then because you can't know the position of an atom and its velocity. Even knowing its exact location is virtually impossible. We wind up here where it should be, in theory, impossible to predict the future, especially if you're going out like 4 years in this case. So how is that happening? All I can say is, he predicted a possible future. Maybe your friend predicted this in every single universe. And again, there's almost an infinite amount of universes. In the multiverse theory, every single possible branching path from every interaction of every atom and source of energy is creating a new universe. There's not infinite, but it might as well be infinite by our standards. In every copy of every universe, your friend predicts his death in the same way. And in only a few of them is it actually accurate. It's sort of like tossing a quadrillion Googleplexes of dice, and eventually you just hit natural 20s, a trillion times in a row. It's extremely unlikely, but that's my only real way to frame this and how it's possible. Case file number 781, written by Goddamn Commie, The Cabin of Dancing. I can't fall asleep right now and figured I'd share my one and only potentially supernatural encounter. It happened when I was 15, about 6 or 7 years ago, when I finally grew old enough to become a counselor at a summer camp. I had attended this annually for most of my childhood. The camp is Camp Anokajig in Plymouth, Wisconsin, if you want to check it out. You would imagine that a summer camp as large and old as Anokajig would have its fair share of scary stories and camp legends, but from my experience, that really wasn't the case. Ghost stories around the campfire were of course popular, but there weren't really any specifically about the camp itself. That is, except one commonly accepted notion among the staff: Thunderbird Cabin 2 is haunted. See, the camp is separated into a boys' and girls' side, and these sides are further divided into sections with names like Lakeview, Timber Trail, or of course, Thunderbird. Counselors would rotate through sections throughout the summer. During the particular week of this story, I was stationed in Thunderbird and was assigned with another counselor who I'll call Keegan to watch over the infamous Cabin 2. Stories about Cabin 2 varied. Entities outside of the windows, goat men, scratching sounds at odd hours of the night, whatever. The diverse and often hyperbolized nature of these stories actually led me to doubt the legitimacy of all of them. It's a much more likely explanation that there was a desire for ghost stories at a camp, and that someone came up with Thunderbird 2 is haunted, which just happened to stick, no? I still believe this, in fact. I don't want to believe in ghosts or the paranormal, but I know what I experienced, and any rational explanation I can come up with does not seem to fully convince me. Anyway, it goes as follows. This week, I was assigned to watch the youngest group of boys, about 6 to 8. We like to have everyone in bed early since the young kids can be restless, and they needed time to wind down. This particular night, things went smoothly for Keegan and I. We had gotten all the kids seemingly asleep rather quickly. Being a little older, we would stay up and chat or read, and this night was no different. We both sat in Keegan's bunk, sharing a pair of earbuds and watching YouTube videos. It's important now to describe the layout of the cabin in Thunderbird. They were simplistic, rectangular, raised wood cabins. The inner perimeter was lined with bunk beds and housed about 20 to 30 campers and 2 counselors. Small, high-set rectangular windows along all sides provided moderate moonlight at night. Anyways, we're watching a video and all the kids are asleep. Dead quiet inside. You can barely hear the crackling of the dwindling campfire outside and the muffled normal sounds of a Midwest forest at night. That is, until something disturbs the peace. The unmistakable sound of someone shaking in a sleeping bag breaks the silence. It's clear from the noise and vibrations that one of the campers is basically flailing in their bunk. Their sleeping bag is rustling, the metal bunk is squeaking, the sound of their body bouncing on the mattress makes a dull thumping noise. Keegan and I quickly take out the earbuds, pause for a moment to listen to the sound, and turn to each other with a concerned, "What the hell?" look on our faces. Initially, I'm actually worried a camper is having a seizure. And then, on the other side of the cabin, we hear the same noise, the same vibration. Only a few seconds after the first camper started to shake, a second one joined in. Then another, and another, and another. Within 7 or 8 seconds, literally every damn kid in this cabin is flailing in their bags. The sound of rustling fabric and straining bed springs is all you can hear. In the pale moonlight, you could also see the outlines of their bodies bouncing around a little. The entire cabin is vibrating at this point, and Keegan and I are frozen, wide-eyed, terrified. We each have the same frightened look, and it's clear that neither of us have any idea what's going on or what to do. We sit, paralyzed, for some period of time, while the collective possession around us continues. After 15 or 20 seconds of this, the cacophony stops. Like a switch is flipped, all the campers stop moving and go perfectly still, back to sleeping undisturbed. Still immobilized with fear, Keegan and I still sit completely still as well, not talking or moving. Scared, I'm assuming that this was simply the beginning of something worse, unsure whether to run or check the campers. Minutes go by, both of us looking around, eyes darting to the door, the surrounding bunks, both of us braced for impending doom. I'm not sure how, but at the same time, both of us silently conclude we should bolt. As fast as we can, we leap from the bunk and sprint out the door into the clearing that accompanies the cabins. The only person still outside is our senior counselor, scrolling through his phone by the fire. He's surprised to see the 2 counselors of the cabin dash out the way we did. Panicked, we try to explain what the hell happened. He brushes it off, but agrees to check the cabin. As you can guess, he doesn't see or hear anything but peacefully sleeping campers. We reluctantly return to the cabin, get in our beds. Still on high alert, I lay awake for some time, braced and waiting for something, but alas, I drift off at some point. Wouldn't you believe it, in the morning, none of the kids claimed to know anything about the night previous. They all claimed to have fallen asleep like any other night, and the phenomenon never happens again. As someone who is wholly skeptical and, as previously stated, does not believe in anything not well founded or observed scientifically, I struggle to think what might have caused this. I want to think that it was a prank, but I just don't think that a bunch of young children could coordinate something like this so well, or even more so, retain their innocence in the matter. If anyone has any similar stories or even heard of anything that could cause this, I'm all ears. It will probably be the most confused and scared I'll ever be in my life. The situation was just so bizarre and sudden. I hope I properly conveyed just how creepy it was. Case notes for file 781, The Cabin of Dancing. So I would say if this was a group of, say, teenagers, 14, 15, then it probably would just be a prank. I would be satisfied enough in just calling it a prank. Even though they didn't come forward later on, that's the best part, to get the person's reaction, but I could be satisfied. But 6 to 8-year-olds? There's no way. Even if they were, extremely organized, an extremely organized group, and they all knew each other, and they were all friends, and they coordinated this brilliantly, there's no way that not one of them would come forward later on to admit that it was a prank. I mean, I know I was an 8-year-old at some point, I'm sure all of you were too, right? Would you be able to pull this off and not admit it later on? I certainly would not be able to do that. I would have been laughing my butt off. I mean, that's the other thing. I would be giggling like a madman after this, maybe a few minutes after. There's no way I would be right back to sleep. No chance. And how would they have coordinated exactly when to do it? So, what could have happened here? Some sort of mass possession? I'm reminded of the dancing plague in 1518. In what is now modern-day France, a village or town back then. There was this woman who just started to dance, seemingly randomly, and then other people joined in, and apparently they danced until they died, although that isn't exactly certain. But they just broke out into dance for hours or even days, with no real explanation back then. Was it mass possession by some weird demon that just wanted to kill people in a most unusual way? Now, it's thought that it could be related to some sort of toxic fungi. So I'm thinking, if the group there in the cabin, if all those kids ate some weird fungus, and experienced delusions from it, some sort of convulsion at the night, I mean, it would make some sense. They didn't all break out into, dancing in their bunk beds exactly at the same time. So each system would process that toxin a little bit differently. It could be even related to whatever toxin was causing the dancing plague all the way back in the 1518. So I could see that being possible, some sort of toxic fungi or other substance that caused this convulsion. But yeah, that's where I'd leave it. Either some sort of mass possession or some sort of environmental factor that was in that specific area.